Welcome back to the Conservatine. I'm your host, Chase Levitt, and today I am joined by someone who is looking to go to the U.S. Senate. He is running for the U.S. Senate to replace Senator Mitt Romney. Today I'm joined by Riverton City Mayor Trent Staggs. Thank you so much for coming on.
Chase, it's great to be on. Thanks so much.
Of course. My first question for you is just a very simple question. Who are you and why are you running for the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, well, I like to say I'm authentically Utahn. I'm a lifelong Utahn. I've been here from elementary school to graduate school. I was raised in a family of 10 kids, believe it or not. So my dad started out as a school teacher, and we learned to be real money conscious and pinch pennies, like quite literally. And I've taken that same approach to government. But after graduating, I attended Bingham High School out in South Jordan. Folks know where that's at. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of Utah in political science and economics. I got my master's in business administration from BYU and operated several companies. I've worked for Fortune 500 company and Morgan Stanley, several other entities, businesses that I've operated as an entrepreneur. And most recently, I worked on the board of directors for a company that I helped take public. We got listed on NASDAQ last February of 2022. It's an energy company, clean tech company. And and for the last 10 years, I've been in elected office here in Riverton City. I was 4 years on the city council and then 6 years, the last 6 years as mayor. My family, I've got my wife, Alicia, and two incredible children. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and absolutely love the state. I say this is home, Utah is home, and love my children, my family. I want them to have the same opportunities that I did. I'm not somebody that came from money at all. I feel like very, very middle class, and I've had my share of successes and challenges, but I love our country and I want my kids to have the same opportunities that I did. And I think that's, to answer your question, one of the biggest motivators for running for United States Senate. I see a lot of challenges that we have with our country. We're deeply in debt. I think that is the height of immorality to place this type of burden debt on our kids and future generations. So we've got to get our own house in order, and there's just several challenges with our country. And I think somebody like myself, that's a demonstrated fighter and conservative, can step in and really help move our country in the direction that we need it.
Nice. Thank you for that answer. And the next thing I want to ask you is what is the biggest problem that you see that our state and our country is facing right now?
Wow. Well, the biggest, I think one of the biggest problems we have is apathy. Um, as a country, I really feel like so many people are unengaged in the political process. I see it down at the municipal level. We have, it's not uncommon for only 15 to 20% of those that are eligible to vote that actually vote in city elections. And I think that's really unfortunate. And then with state and national politics, I think that so many people are are rather uninformed and don't take the time to really understand the issues and the impact that that has on their lives. And so I might call that, kind of reclassify it as just economic and civic literacy. We need to make sure we're teaching civics to everybody. It was such an integral part of one's education at our founding. Everybody was very conversant in the Constitution. They understood that. They had discussions around politics and our rights. And so people need to understand, I think, those things, that our founding documents clearly demonstrate that our rights come from our creator and God. They don't come from government. Um, people, I think many people these days think that their rights come from, the generosity of the state, as
Yeah.
JFK once said. He said that's not the case. It comes from the hand of God. And so those liberties, those freedoms that we have, that we've inherited, we need to make sure we understand, and then make sure that we're participating in the political process. I think there's a lot of other issues, but
Yeah.
at its core, if people truly understood that, Chase, and I know you're a very passionate about politics and a great student of this country. If people had that type of commitment, the vast majority, we would be in a much different place today.
Right. I couldn't agree more. You see all these people, even elected officials, it's like they don't seem educated. They don't seem like they put much time into actually thinking about, okay, what is this issue and how can I like form my own opinion about something. So now I want to get into some questions that people have asked me to ask you. This first one is about Ukraine. Um, what is your stance on the ongoing war in Ukraine, and should the U.S. continue to be sending billions and billions of dollars?
Yeah, it's a great question. And people can see kind of my top issues at trentstaggs.com at my website. And one of my issues is does relate to the military and just defense generally. I think American leadership in the world is very, very important. I think our military is essential. One of the primary things that a government's supposed to do, right, is protect our our liberties, our rights to life, liberty, and property. And so our military is very, very important. I am concerned, however, with 750 plus military bases around the world. We cannot provide security for the world, and we can't especially do it for free. And so in my launch video, I actually called this out. I said, while we're dealing with $4 gallon gas, the Congress right now is sending our money unchecked to Ukraine.
Yeah,
And so, are there instances where it's in U.S. interests to help allied nations and to protect our interests? Sure, but with Ukraine not even being a member of NATO, some questions around uh, their commitment to freedom too. I mean, suddenly we think that they're always this picture perfect democracy, but
right.
they've had their issues, and to send the amount of money, I think some 170 billion or so that we've
Yeah,
sent to Ukraine with no transparency, no accountability. When European nations, I think, have only committed about $20 billion, that's a problem. That's definitely a problem. We can't be, the U.S. taxpayer cannot be doing this, cannot be just sending money unchecked to Ukraine, and definitely uh, much more than Europe, than its closest neighbors. It's not a great policy
I agree, and
in my
especially, sorry,
no, in my opinion. Yeah, it's just not a great policy.
yeah, and especially when there's so much going wrong here at home.
Right.
I 100% agree on that. The next question I have for you is about the debt ceiling bill that just got passed through the House and the Senate. And Senator Mitt Romney decided to vote for the bill. And I saw that you had called out this Mitt Romney for voting yes to this bill. What is your stance on the bill, and what would your vote have been if you had been on the Senate floor?
Yeah, I think it's a horrible bill. My vote would have been no. I would have mirrored Mike Lee. Look, we need to stop compromising for the sake of compromise. That's another thing that I put out there in my in my launch video and in announcements. Um, People need to know that conservatives are going to fight for conservative principles, and in no way do I think, Senator Romney indicated this was a good deal for the country, quote unquote. And my response on Twitter was, in no way do I think adding 4 trillion more dollars to our debt is a good deal in any way, shape, or form for the country. Um, I we need we need to be on a pathway to a balanced budget. We need to be to a balanced budget. I'm a proponent of a balanced budget amendment. We need to cut back in spending. That's what I've done here in my city of Riverton as mayor. We've had balanced budgets every year. I've actually cut taxes and spending. We need to have people in Washington that are committed to the same. And I can't believe that this was the only option. And Senator Romney, 5 years ago when he ran, that was one of the things he promised. He promised he would put us on a pathway to a balanced budget. He would end illegal immigration. He would stop federal overreach. He would appoint conservative justices to the court. Not only has he not done those things, he's done just the opposite. And so, my positioning here would be, we have to finally rein this in. This is ridiculous. I mean, Chase, we haven't had a balanced budget since I think 2001. The
Yeah.
last 22 years, the last 22 years, we have spent far more than we've taken in revenue, and we're bringing in trillions. We've never brought in more revenue to the Treasury than we are now. So it clearly is not a, a, a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. And we need people in DC that will fight and push back on it.
I agree. Now, the next question here, I'm shifting gears. Um, a lot of conservatives, not even just conservatives, a lot of Americans in general, see a lot of these so-called three-letter agencies such as the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, the ATF, etc., as becoming too powerful or weaponizing their power. How would you
Yeah.
describe these agencies, and are you willing to speak out against what some have accused them of doing?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yes, so the short answer is absolutely be able to speak out against these agencies that have been weaponized, right? They've been politicized and used by presidential administration and people in power to really try to impose their will and ideology. We've seen kind of a two-tiered justice system, right? Where if they want to mobilize these agencies against certain individuals for committing supposedly certain offenses, they will go full board and use all the resources of those agencies. Whereas you've got other people that may have literally, have more grievous, um, have clearly broken the law,
Right.
and they're not they're not prosecuted. They're not, you know, uh, prosecuted at all. So there needs to be a level of the highest level of transparency and accountability with these organizations. Most Americans, I think, have lost faith in uh, these groups that are supposed to serve the public. They're supposed to uniformly and blindly administer, justice, and they're not doing it right now. It's very, very clear that they've been politicized and weaponized. And so the Senate, I think, has a huge role in its oversight of these agencies. They've got the power of the purse, and through reform to make certain that these abuses stop and we can get back uh, to really serving the public and protecting the public
Right.
instead of persecuting the public.
Right. Thank you for that answer. And now my next question is about the central bank digital currency. That's something that many conservatives are concerned about. What I
Right.
want to ask you, what's your opinion on that? And will you use any ability at your disposal to oppose the CBDC?
Yeah, I think it's a big concern, right? Whenever power is centralized, I mean, our founders knew that. They understood that concept that's what they wanted to avoid. And a centralized currency does just that. It empowers, um, it just concentrates power, um, and really has the potential of punishing people. And we just, your previous question plays right into this, because if you've got agencies that have now been weaponized and they're punishing people for their professed ideologies, political standpoints, what have you, I mean, what's to prevent the uh, a central or digital currency, from being used in that same fashion? So yeah, I think
Right.
it's a big concern and something we need to address.
Okay, thank you for that. And now I want to shift gears once more to a new topic, and that is the Second Amendment. A lot of Second Amendment rights have been attacked over the last few years, especially, it feels like. So I want to ask you specifically, what is your stance on the Second Amendment? And would you pledge to oppose any infringements that threaten our Second Amendment rights as law-abiding Americans?
Yeah, the answer is yes to that question. I'm a huge proponent of the Second Amendment. My son and I go shooting all the time. I'm a gun owner, uh, and I look. The only thing I say on my website too, because we talk about crime. I'm running on a platform of smaller government, safer families, and a stronger economy. And there's some three issues tied to each one that we're looking at. And with respect to safer families, crime. The only thing that's up more than crime right now is gun ownership. Thank goodness. People recognize they inherently have a God-given right to self-defense. And sadly, and I say this with all seriousness, sadly, this crazy defund the police movement in certain communities has impacted these communities in such a way that they can't rely on the government to protect them.
Right.
They have to rely on themselves, and it's really sad the state that we're in. So yeah, we know this throughout history that tyrants, when they rise to power or try to come to power, the first thing they do is to go after people's weapons and put them in a situation where they're defenseless. And that's something that, fortunately, our founders were wise enough to see that that's something that we need in our country. They they adopted that into the Bill of Rights, and we'll support that 100%.
And you talked about how one of your main platforms or stances is safer families. How
Yes.
will you look to make change in the Senate to defend our borders and to create a safer America for all of us to live in?
Yeah, that's we talked a little bit about crime. I think education ties into safer families as well. The Department of Education, federally, I think needs to be completely disbanded. They got 174 billion at their in their budget this year. I think it's ridiculous. But with the border, particularly, what a travesty that we have right now.
Right.
This is something that Mitt Romney, again, he promised that he would end illegal immigration in his campaign commercial from 5 years ago. He's done nothing. In fact, petulantly, he refused to work with President Trump when President Trump was trying to put in a border wall, and he even was one of a few Republicans that supported our Homeland Secretary Mayorkas, who I think is one of the most incompetent individuals in
Yeah.
D.C. He's let this border just balloon into the crisis that we have today. So we need to enforce our laws. Um, Look, I know so many Utahns and Americans, we're just kind-hearted. My family is immigrant. I have, my grandparents that came from Italy and from Western Europe. Um, we want people to succeed. We want them to take part in the American dream, but we have to have a process. Every country enforces its borders and travel of non-citizens. We're not doing that. For some reason in this country, it's become controversial to even enforce our laws. And so we need to enforce the laws. We need to have a border wall with a nice big, door on it that people follow a process to come here. If we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And we've seen millions and millions of people break our law just in the time Biden's been in office, coming through here and just saturating our country. Um, and it's beyond the breaking point. I mean, you see these shanty towns where people are in along the border, and now throughout the country. Um, this can't be. We need to have a process. We need to enforce our laws, and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. That's one of the primary roles of the federal government, and they've gotten so big. They're doing so many things. The federal government now has failed on the few things they're supposed to be doing, and immigration is definitely one of them.
Right. And with this wide open border, it's literally turned every city in America into a border city, which is creating further crime, further national security risk, and it's just getting ridiculous.
You're right, and I've seen buses dropped off, even
Yeah.
across the state, and even in my own community, people are processed, and it's that, and that's what people don't understand. By this lawlessness, by endorsing this lawlessness, you are enriching gangs and some of the most nefarious people on the planet that don't care at all about people. And so it's a human disaster what's going on. The trafficking that's happening, the fentanyl, over 100,000 people that are killed because drugs are just flowing through our border. Enough is enough. It needs to be enforced, and it needs to be done yesterday.
I agree. Now I want to shift gears once more and talk about the caucus system and the convention system that we uniquely have here in Utah. Someone asked if whether or not you would pledge to support and only run through the caucus and convention system to get on the ballot.
I have. Yes. That's the short answer. I think it's unfortunate that a few years ago, SB 54 was passed by the legislature. I still don't understand how a state legislature can dictate to a political party how that party is going to have and nominate its candidates, right, for the
Yeah.
general election. So I've been a huge believer in in the caucus and convention system. I've been a delegate several times, county and state. I support that system. Have said to my team, I said, "Hey, look, if I can't even win 40% of the delegates, I don't deserve to be on the ballot and representing this great state." So we've committed to the convention system. We're out right now. We're reaching out to delegates, and we're going to be traveling all 29 counties and talking about my background and story and why we think that we're the best one to represent the state.
Right. Thank you for that
Right.
answer. And I just have one more question for you, and it's a very simple one. I love to ask all the people that I interview that are running for office or that are in office, but just what is your message to Utahns?
My message is that we deserve better. We need another senator that is conservative and will actually fight for the people of this great state. We don't have that right now in Senator Mitt Romney. I'm one that is from this state. I'm authentically Utah. I'm consistently conservative. I've got a track record, 10 years in office, where I have been on the front lines, literally as a mayor. I've been on the front lines of fighting government overreach, whether that be federal, state, or county. I've got a record of pushing back. I'm a fighter. I've fought against mask mandates and vaccine mandates here at our community. That's well documented. I fought for life. We fought against inappropriate materials in schools. I've fought back on taxes. I've brought a business approach to government where we've innovated constantly and lowered the cost of government and cut taxes. We've actually cut taxes in my city. So that's what people need is a proven conservative fighter. And we need that more than ever in Washington, D.C. And that's exactly what I'll take if you elect me as your senator.
Right. Thank you for that answer. And first of all, I just want to thank you for your service as the Riverton City Mayor and for all the work that you've done to create a better environment for your community and everything like that, and standing true to your conservative values. And second of all, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me.
Well, thank you. Anytime, Chase. I love again how passionate you are and the audience that you have. It's really gives someone like myself some hope for the future of this country. And thank you for being such a great patriot and all that you do.
Of course. Thank you. Okay. We'll see you.